Well, previously at Parramatta,
And in verse 29, it says, Moses and Aaron brought together all the elders of the Israelites, and Aaron told them everything the Lord had said to Moses. He also performed the signs before the people, and they believed. And when they heard that the Lord was concerned about them and had seen their misery, they bowed down and they worshipped God. See, it was Moses' job to go. He brought Aaron along with him to communicate this message. And what happens is God shows up. He reveals himself. He does something in the hearts of the people.
well, as you've already heard, last week we commenced a series on YHWY, a faithful God. And Sarah shared with us, that was part of her message, from chapters 1 to 4 of Exodus, concluding with that verse that she just read, which was the very last verse in chapter 4. And she said that God showed up, which is true. Well, I want you this morning really to strap yourselves in, because I saw Sarah's 4 chapters last week and I thought, 4 chapters, I can do better than 4 chapters. I'm going to double it. And so today we're going to look at 8 chapters of Exodus. So you should be home by dinner time. No, that's not true. Well, you will be home by dinner time, but it won't be that long. But let me just recap a little bit for you. We know that Moses had returned to Egypt at the request of God to advocate to Pharaoh on behalf of the Israelites. The Israelites were living under oppression, and God instructed Moses to go to Pharaoh and request that the people be freed, or let go is the language that we have heard. And so in the very next verse, after the verse that Sarah shared with us towards the end of the message last week, we read of Moses' obedience. And it says that Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Let my people go, so that they may hold a festival to me in the wilderness." Now we have to remember that Pharaoh was a powerful man, a ruler who was probably worshipped like a god. What he said was the law, and he literally held the life and death of people in his hand. There were probably sculptures and statues and buildings that bore his name, or perhaps even his image, throughout the land. And everybody knew of the power and authority that he had and that he used. So when I think about Moses and Aaron, I think what they did just by going to see him was remarkable in itself. And any wonder that Moses was reluctant to go in the first place, saying, "Oh Lord, please send someone else to do it." But Pharaoh's response to the question of, or to the statement of "let my people go" is interesting, because he says, "Who is the Lord that I should obey him and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go." I do not know the Lord. Well, now, if this was me, I think I may well have returned to God and said, "Look, I tried, but Pharaoh said no. So sorry about that. Is there anything else I could possibly do for you, God?" But not Moses. Moses changed his tack slightly, and he asked Pharaoh again, this time for 3 days off, so that the Israelites could go into the desert and offer sacrifices to their God. And again, Pharaoh said no, but it was not just no, it was no and. It was no, and now you're going to have to collect your own straw to make the bricks. You see, the Israelites really were spending their days in hard labour, working for Pharaoh, building bricks. Previous to this, all that they needed to make a brick was being supplied, but no longer. Now they had to go and gather their own supplies. Well, I'm sure you're not surprised to know that I have very little knowledge about making bricks. And I said in the 9:30, perhaps less knowledge than what Sarah does about mowing lawns. But anyway, the knowledge that I have about brick making comes from some friends of ours 30 years ago, which makes me sound old, when they were building their own home in rural Victoria. Now, beautiful part of the world to live in Halls Gap, but not only were they building their own home, they were hand making the mud bricks to build their own home. And it was a slow process, but their finished home was amazing and was all handmade. Well, this week, just for fun, I Googled how to make a mud brick, and this is what I learnt. It's just like following a recipe. So if you're interested, here's the ingredients, or the materials apparently, and you'll see there that you can substitute the straw with dry grass or pine needles. And if you want to do it when you get home this afternoon, here's the directions to do it. I think they're going to come up on the screen. You can, no, we've got a little problem. Yep, so you basically just make a mud pie and then put it into a milk carton. Oh, there we go, and leave it to dry. So happy to email that through if anyone's interested in making their own bricks later on. But it was quite a process, and because Pharaoh was so unhappy with the requests being made to them, he decided to make the lives of the Israelites worse, if you like. Because not only did they have to make the bricks, they then had to now gather the straw to make the bricks. But the number of bricks that they were required to produce did not decrease. Their quota remained the same, probably meaning that they would then have to work longer hours to produce the same number of goods. These poor Israelites who had already suffered for years at the hand of Pharaoh were now going to endure even greater pain. So what does Moses do when he's told by Pharaoh, no, I'm not going to let the people go? He goes back to the Lord and he asks questions. He says, why, Lord, have you brought trouble on this people? Is this why you sent me? Ever since I went to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has brought trouble on this people, and you have not rescued your people at all. Why, Lord, have you asked me to do this? This is too hard. I'm getting nowhere. It's a waste of my time. People aren't listening. People are rejecting me and you, and things are getting worse. Why, Lord, have you asked me to do this? Can anyone relate to Moses? But then the Lord said, now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh. Because of my mighty hand, he will let them go. Because of my mighty hand, he will drive them out of his country. Did Moses doubt? Yes. Did he question? Yes. But did he walk away, throw in the towel, as we might say today? No, he didn't. And why didn't he? Well, because his faith was strong. And how could it not be after he had encountered God in the burning bush? In fact, throughout Exodus chapter 6, the message from the burning bush in a more simplified version is repeated 6 times to Moses. When God says in these verses, in verse 2, in verse 6, in verse 7, in verse 8, and again in verse 29, he says, I am the Lord, or I am the Lord your God. Time after time after time, God reminds Moses of his message. Perhaps he's reminding Moses of where his focus should be. Your eyes are in the wrong place. Get your eyes back on me and remember who I am, the Lord. We know a well-known verse in Hebrews 12 verse 2 that says, let us keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, on whom our faith depends from beginning to end. When things get tough, where is your focus? Well, I would encourage you to keep your eyes on the Lord your God, the Lord our God, and see that he will follow through with his promises. And not only does God tell Moses who he is, he also tells him 8 times in those verses that Janet read to us earlier what he will do. He says in verse 1 of chapter 6, see what I will do. And then he goes on and he says, I will bring, I will deliver, I will redeem, I will take, I will be, I will bring again, I will give. God is saying, because I am who I am, I will do what is best for you. I will keep my promises. It's kind of easy for us looking at this story of Moses all these years later, and I sometimes wonder this about the disciples, how come people just didn't get it when God was clearly moving or Jesus was there with them? And God is saying, and he said multiple times, that I am the Lord and this is what's going to happen. I will bring the Israelites out of Egypt, but you need to trust me. I am the Lord, I know what I am doing. I seriously think, and as I've been reading the passage of scripture again this week, that I would have given up by now if I were Moses. So it's probably lucky that I'm Kylie and not Moses, because Pharaoh was just not budging. Moses had received this instruction from God, but Pharaoh was not allowing it to happen. Little wonder really when Pharaoh asks, who is the Lord? And so, with the help still of Moses and Aaron, God shows Pharaoh who he is by the 10 plagues that he sends to Egypt. And so, throughout chapters 7 to 11, we read of these plagues that one person has called plagues that preach. And here they are. Water turning into blood. Frogs, lice. None of them are good. All of them would make us cringe. We have frogs in our backyard sometimes, and I'm not particularly fond of them, especially when they're sucking onto the window as I'm trying to watch TV. And if you read these chapters from Exodus 7 to 11, all throughout the account of the plagues, we read the word all. All of the land was affected, all of the people, all the Egyptian livestock, all the firstborn sons. There was no one in Egypt that was spared from these plagues. And in Exodus 12, verses 29 to 30, we read, at midnight the Lord struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on the throne to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, and the firstborn of all the livestock as well. Pharaoh and all his officials and all the Egyptians got up during the night, and there was a loud wailing in Egypt, for there was not a house without someone dead. What did Pharaoh do? Well, these plagues that preach obviously spoke to him, because he summoned Moses and Aaron during the night, and he said, up, leave my people, you and the Israelites, go worship the Lord as you have requested. Take your flocks and herds as you have said and go. Just get out. Leave us alone. You win. But in the New International Version, Pharaoh says 4 more words. In other versions and paraphrases, it's more than 4 words. But here's some of the different translations. And also bless me. Go, but bless me as you leave. Also, pray for a blessing on me. But ask your God to be kind to me, Pharaoh says to Moses. I wonder if suddenly Pharaoh was realizing who this Lord really was, the power that he had. So much so that he was asking for a blessing from him. So let me return again to Sarah's message last week from Exodus chapter 3. The Lord speaking from the burning bush, and he says, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I've come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of the land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. So now go, he says to Moses. Go, I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you. We can know in our heads what God has said, and I'm sure that Moses did every time he went to Pharaoh. He would recall these words. I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring the people out of Egypt. But it takes faith and courage to put this into practice, to get out there and start doing what God has told us to do. And it takes strength and persistence to continue on, even when we're not getting the action or the answers that we are expecting or that we want. We have this great book at home written by Charles Swindoll, which is on the life of Moses. And Swindoll says that this is how we need to pray, even when we feel as if we never want to pray again. It says, Lord, I don't feel like praying right now, but hear my prayer anyway, Lord. I will believe you, even though the tide is rising and I'm already on tiptoe. I will believe you, even though it seems like it's taking you forever to keep your promise. I will believe you, even though I've come to the ragged end of my strength, the dregs of my hope, the broken shards of my plans. I will not look for a shortcut. I will not take a carnal option. I will not retreat from the battle. I will believe you. God promised to Moses that he would be with him. And the promise to Moses is still the same promise for us. I am the Lord. And because I am a faithful God, I will keep my promises. I will be with you. I will do what is best for you, and I will deliver you just as I delivered the Israelites from Egypt. You, Moses, you need to believe and know that I am God. Believe and know that I am God, and see that I will keep my promises and will deliver you. How true this is for us as followers of God. Our great God will still deliver us from whatever we need to be delivered from. But we still need to acknowledge that he is the Lord.